On today's video, I'm going to satchify your legato playing with 3 easy phrasing concepts that are going to have you slipping and sliding all over that neck like it was the doggone Crocodile Mile. Hey there kids, it's your good buddy, Uncle Ben. Joe Satriani is one of my earliest and most influential guitar heroes. I think some of the first really fast, shreddy licks that I ever learned were his legato phrases from songs off of Surfing with the Alien and Flying in a Blue Dream. But I don't see a lot of lessons devoted to some of those legato isms that Joe tosses into his playing, so on today's video I'm going to show you a handful of my favorites. As always, this video is brought to you guys by everybody who supports my channel over on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. Sign up today for all kinds of goodies like bonus lessons, downloadable tabs, backing tracks, and so much more. Gear-wise for today's video, I'm going to be playing my ancient Ibanez RG550 here with Fishman Fluence classic pickups, and I'm playing that into my Synergy rig. Joe has always been a fan of those hot-rodded British tones, so it seems like a perfect day to use the BE DLX module from Friedman. Now let's start saturating your playing with some of these concepts. All of today's examples are going to be in the key of B minor, but be sure to try out these concepts in every scale and mode that you know. First thing that you have to understand about Satriani's legato playing is he keeps it the same way that your stepmom kept her dating track record in high school. Loose and odd. What I mean by that is that unlike a lot of players like Paul Gilbert or John Petrucci that keep their phrasing very on the grid as like straight 16th notes, you know, where there's a very easy to feel 4 notes per beat or whatever going by, Satriani's time feel whenever he does the fast legato stuff is really loose and really floaty, for lack of a better word. Here's a scale pattern that he used in that lick. It's a 3 note per string scale shape. You could call it A mixolydian, you could call it B minor starting from the 7th note, just don't call it late for dinner. Here's the shape. With a lot of players, whenever they play 3 note per string scales, they kind of naturally come out as triplets. Triplet, 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 triplet. But that's just not really cool enough for a guy like Joe. If Satriani was using that kind of scale pattern, odds are he would play up and down each string with just 1 pick stroke on the first note. Sounds something like this. You can hear I just went up, down, and back up the string. When you phrase it that way, you end up playing 7 notes over every single beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you're just kind of trying to cram each one of those 1-string phrases into a singular beat. The way that I accomplish this is to try to think about landing my first finger on the next string whenever that next beat rolls around. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. It's like I'm really just feeling the first finger on every one of those groupings. That's that same concept, but descending instead. You can hear a really similar run towards the end of the solo in Flying in a Blue Dream. Same idea, I'm just going in the opposite direction instead. Starting off on the top note, pulling off down, hammering on up, pulling off down for every string. You'll notice that I ended that run there on the root note of B. I was kind of imagining that run working over like a B minor chord or riff, you know? Satriani is a real master of sticking the dismount on his runs. He doesn't just end a run wherever the scale pattern terminates. He's always thinking about what am I playing over and what would be a good, strong, relevant note to land on at the end of a sick run like that. So the last lick there was based around a 3 note per string scale pattern, but Satriani also relies heavily on 4 note per string ideas. So that's also based in B minor, and if I just played down that pattern instead of phrasing inside of it, it would look like this. So whenever you look at that, it's easy to see this as 1, 2, 3, 4 notes all existing on the same string. But the way that Satriani phrases stuff, it's more like it's this group of 3 notes. And then if you go down a fret, you have this group of 3 notes. That allows him to play up one pattern, slide down, and play up and down the next pattern. The lick I constructed there, that's exactly what it does the whole way through. You can see inside of all those shapes how you've got a 3-note group and then its next door neighbor, which is another 3-note group. The slide in there will really test your rhythm, as well as making sure that you can sustain that note whenever you slide down. You got to slide down kind of hard, sort of force it down, and it really helps too if your guitar has kind of bigger frets on it. I think just simply driving over those big old speed bumps makes it a little bit easier to keep that note sustaining. It's kind of like the friction that you get whenever you quickly glide over those big old train track frets that Ibanez uses, kind of plucks the string on its own. So you can look at this phrase and play it really square rhythmically as 16th notes. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and if I'm not mistaken, way back on like Weekend Wank Shop #1 from like 100 years ago here in my channel demonstrated a really similar idea. But that's not really how Satriani would play a phrase like that. He's not really a straight 16th note kind of guy for the most part. If he was playing a phrase like this, he would probably accent some of the high notes in it and kind of sit on them for a second before moving on and playing some more of the lick. It might sound something like this. Now that's technically the same phrase as, but it sounds way more interesting because the rhythm isn't just 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, kind of straight 16s. You'll notice one thing that he does a lot of times is he'll hammer down the highest note in a pattern before quickly, you know, pulling off or sliding through the other notes in the pattern. There's a really similar phrase to that at the end of Always With Me, Always With You. There at the very end, he plays this descending thing in B major that has that same kind of vibe to it. And again, it really floats all over the beat. You know, he's not playing this stuff straight and metric. He's playing it really loose and really floaty, and that's where the appeal is. That's what makes this stuff sound so unique. Now, there's also players out there like Alan Holdsworth, Tom Quayle, Brett Garsed. Those guys do the really rhythmic legato thing, which is super impressive and cool sounding in its own right. But if you're looking to master the Satriani style thing, try these slurry, blurry phrases where you're kind of melting through the notes and hang on a particular note for a second, then come down, hang on another note for a second before you continue a lick. So the last phrasing idea I want to show you guys here centers around one string scale shapes. Now Satriani does these a lot. He's a very lateral player, and I think that's partially so you can get a lot of range out of one thing and keep the momentum going with that legato, as well as keeping the voice of that string and the voice of the tone more consistent than moving through the strings in a vertical fashion. So once again, that's based on a B minor scale. If I played the pattern, it would look like this. And he's mowing these down in 3-note groupings before he slides down to the next note in the grouping, kind of like what we did in the second example. Now you'll notice here at the first of the lick, I kind of did this wind up. This is something Satriani has done his whole career, and I have totally ripped this off and used it in so many of my own solos. It's just a cool way to kind of introduce, you know, a note into the melody rather than just playing it and sitting there. It's like a little wind up before you start shredding. I've always really liked that sound. So you'll notice after we do that wind up, the first finger is really in charge right here. It's leading us down slide by slide through all those various scale positions, 3 notes at a time. So that was that idea played with really straight timing, which doesn't really sound like Satriani anymore, right? it really needs that kind of push and pull effect by keeping the time really loose. This makes this stuff such a huge hassle to transcribe, by the way. You're gonna be seeing stuff where there's like 9 notes across 2 beats. It gets really hard to transcribe that stuff, but it sounds so cool. It's worth getting under your fingertips. There's that idea I talked about a second ago where he kind of hangs on the top note before quickly kind of slurring through the next notes. He'll mix the phrasing up like that kind of thing too. You'll notice there towards the end I switched to, I love that phrase. And that's kind of keeping it more simple and less stretchy. Now, one thing that I've not mentioned yet as I've been going through these examples is the muting aspect of this. We've kind of been focusing on what the left hand is doing. The right hand is kind of minimal, right? Barely doing any pick strokes, but it's actually doing a lot more than that because it's doing a lot of the muting. And this is something that I learned from some Satriani videos that I saw on the internet like a bajillion years ago. Satriani, if you'll watch his right hand, he really subtly keeps whatever strings he doesn't want you to hear muted. Okay, so for example, with that one string lick that we're just playing, you might not be able to see this on camera, but right now my middle finger is touching the B string. So the lick is all on the first string. I'm muting the second string with the fleshy fingertip of one of my free fingers that isn't holding the pick. I could use my ring finger too, whatever floats your boat really. But simply by touching that string, that means if my hammer-ons and pull-offs get a little frisky over here and they kind of smack into that string, you're not going to hear it because it's being muted. A lot of times whenever I do this kind of thing, I kind of double bag it in a lot of ways where I'll mute the next 2 strings above the one that's in play by using these 2 fingers. So in this case, I would be on the B string with my ring finger and the G string with my middle finger, and then I can pick that high E string and do all the legato stuff without any fear of causing noise from those next 2 strings that are above it. See that grip right there, right? You can see I'm just kind of sitting on top of those strings. Because the thing about it is too, other than just keeping them muted for if your left hand accidentally hits them, if those notes are generating any sympathetic vibrations, you know, just kind of ringing out because they're not being touched in any way, that can kind of eat into the sustain that you're gonna need on that high E string to make these licks stand out with all the legato and slides and stuff. So keeping it cleaner is gonna make it sustain a lot better. Now that kind of finger muting technique, that applies down here on the bottom as well. So for example, if I was doing a phrase here maybe on the A string, do you see this grip going on right here? I'm using my second, third, and fourth fingers to mute the D, G, and B strings. That way they won't be heard at all. And I'll kind of move those around string set by string set, depending on what the phrase calls for. But the point is, I'm using whatever free fingers I have on my right hand here to dampen out and keep quiet the strings that I don't want you to hear. You can also do that even with the tops of the fingers or even the tops of the fingernails, like this right here. That's totally acceptable. Just as long as you're keeping something on those strings, it's gonna make them sound a lot cleaner. So there you go, guys, a handful of Satch essentials to get your legato flowing like butter. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, all that good stuff that we ask you to do. It really does help us out a lot. And if you really want to help me out a ton and gain access to tons of awesome bonus content and a community of awesome people like yourself, sign up today to that Patreon page over at patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. There is so much extra stuff over there. You gotta check it out. And be sure to let me know in the comments section what guitar idol you'd like to see a video devoted to next. Well guys, it's been fun as always, but I'm gonna slip and slide on out of here and go get myself a tiki drink at a local bar, I believe. I've earned it, right? As for you guys, I recommend that you get away from the computer machine, grab your guitar, and start slipping and sliding around on them ropes. Less clicking, more picking, and more Mai Tais.